Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins. I'm joined as always by Brandon Scott. You know him as B. Scott. Well, we have reached conference championship weekend in college football, and there is still a lot left to be decided, and today we're going to discuss the chances each playoff contender has of being selected. We're also going to hand out our conference championship game picks and tell you who we think is going to be the final four left, who the playoff committee is going to select to be in the final four-team college football playoff. We're going to get into the weeds here. We're going to say who we think is going to get in, who gets left out. Could Florida State be on the outside looking in, even as an undefeated ACC champ? Could Ohio State still be in play? A lot still left to be decided. Still 7 or 8 teams still in the mix here, B. Scott.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of gone a little according to plan, except for the fact that Florida State's QB1 has gone down with a season-ending injury, which could really affect their playoff chances.
Yeah, it's we'll get into it a little bit later, but it kind of it's one of those kind of unfortunate things where you don't want to assume what they're going to be able to do if they were to go into the postseason, but also that it's not a consideration, you know what I mean? Like, you have to, like, they're definitely a different team with their quarterback too. So what do you do if there's other teams, especially a year like this year, where there are other deserving teams that are, right at their heels that are healthy at that position? Obviously next year won't really have that issue. You're going to have the 12-team playoff and that kind of thing. Now, because of when we record the podcast, we record on Tuesday nights and then release on Wednesdays. So we do have the luxury of, at least when we recorded, we didn't record too early to where we do have the updated rankings that just came out, so it's breaking to us. Won't be breaking when this releases tomorrow, but the college football playoff rankings that just got released this week. Georgia's number 1, no shocker there. Michigan's number 2. They move up obviously after beating Ohio State. Washington now moves up to 3. Florida State is 4. Oregon is 5. Ohio State is 6. So that kind of factors into things as we look. I think it's pretty much identical in the AP poll, which is what we went off for the outline. So that is the current college football playoff rankings. But I mean, look, we'll have Washington and Oregon play each other. That's a rematch from a game earlier this year. You've got what happens. You've got Georgia versus Bama this week. What happens if Bama wins that one? So a lot of different scenarios that could play out. And the way it got set up this way was a lot of great action this past weekend as well. So looking back at what happened on rivalry weekend, you had number 3 Michigan versus number 2 Ohio State. Michigan winning again 30-24. Blake Corum in that game, 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. Michigan gets their third win against Ohio State. Number 4 Washington squeaks past Washington State on a 42-yard field goal as time expired. 24-21 the final there. Number 8 Bama survives versus Auburn 27-24. Jalen Milroe connects with Isaiah Bond for a 31-yard touchdown with 32 seconds left. Florida State finishes off their undefeated regular season with a 24-15 win in Gainesville versus Florida. Trey Benson had 95 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns. Tate Rodemaker, the backup quarterback for Florida State, was just 12 of 25 for 135 yards. Of course, Jordan Travis got injured a couple of weeks ago. Number 1, Georgia hangs on 31-23 after a late rally by Georgia Tech. Kendall Milton had 156 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. And then, of course, looking back even to Friday, number 6 Oregon cruises past number 16 Oregon State 31-7. And number 7 Texas dismantles Texas Tech 57-7. Bo Nix had 367 yards and 2 touchdowns for Oregon. Longhorns running back Jaden Blue had 121 yards and a touchdown in their win. So on championship weekend, it all gets kicked off Friday night, the Pac-12 championship, number 5 Oregon versus number 3 Washington. And then in the Big 12 championship, that's going to be the first Power 5 game to get going on Saturday. That's going to see number 19 Oklahoma State versus number 7 Texas. These are all the AP poll rankings, by the way, just to discern that when we made the outline. These are just all the ones in the AP poll. So that's what we went off of for this exercise. SEC championship, it's going to be number 1 Georgia versus number 8 Alabama. Then in the ACC championship, it's going to be number 15 Louisville versus number 5 Florida State. And then in the Big Ten championship, it's going to finish us all out here. It's number 3 Michigan versus number 18 Iowa. Actually, I think I didn't change that. It's number 2 Michigan, I think, in the AP poll now. I didn't change that from when I originally filled that in.
I still can't believe Iowa's ranked.
Yeah, it's I've got a nugget for you. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I think you'll appreciate it. That's when we get to the Big Ten championship prediction, that you're gonna enjoy for Iowa's offense. But so what we're gonna do on today's podcast, the exercise I have for us is we're gonna do hot or cold, and we've done kind of a similar thing to this before, where it's not a hot or cold take per se like it normally is, where we say a take and say whether it's a hot take or a cold take, but rather we're going to say a team and we're going to describe their likelihood of making the college football playoff on a scale of hot to cold. So, if you think Michigan is going to be a lock, you say hot. If you think, Florida State, or Ohio State is not going to make it, then you say cold, and that's how we're going to go. So, and I'm going to go in order again by where they're ranked in the AP poll. Starting off, we'll start with number 1 Georgia here. And so I'm going to say hot or cold on this one. I'm going to go hot, but not as hot as you'd think. I originally had them as a lock, no matter what happened in the SEC championship game. But Bama is still 8th in the AP and coaches poll, and I have, without looking beyond the top 6 that we just read off, I'm assuming they're still 8th. So not much has changed from that 8th ranking. So if Bama beats Georgia in the SEC championship, how far will the Bulldogs fall, and how high will Bama rise, and what do you do with everyone else? Assuming Michigan wins the Big Ten, they'd be number 1. The winner of Washington-Oregon would be number 2. So then would Bama be 3 and Georgia 4, despite the result of the Big Ten or the Big 12 and the ACC championships? What do you do with both of those teams? And now, granted, I mean,
and then Texas,
right? You have Texas. Well,
are you going to jump Alabama over Texas?
Right. So, yeah, right. If Alabama's a 1-loss SEC champ and Texas is a 1-loss Big 12 champ and Texas won between Alabama and Texas, then what do you do there? And do you really then say the SEC championship didn't matter? We're just going to still leave Georgia in. It's going to be Georgia 3, Texas 4, something like that. So it creates a conundrum all itself. In a year where we have all these options, are we going to have a situation where we have 2 SEC teams in just because, just for the heck of it? You know what I mean? Almost what it feels like, yeah, it seems wrong to not have Georgia in, but at the same time, if Bama wins, I feel like they shouldn't not be in, but at the same time, do they deserve to level up that many spots to be 4? It's hard to imagine they wouldn't jump up to 4, but then how far does Georgia fall? Does Georgia fall to 5? So it's interesting to kind of have that discussion. I feel like if this were any other division other than the SEC, we wouldn't be having the discussion and be like, oh, well, yeah, if Georgia loses, obviously they're out. But because it's the SEC, it's a whole different animal. So, especially because Georgia's the 2-time defending champions. They have been number 1 all year. They're considered the best team. They've been the best team all year. Are they really going to fall so far? Because they can't fall past 3 or 4. So what do they do with them? So all I'm saying, I still am pretty confident they're going to be in. It's just I don't think that they're a lock, because I think there is a scenario where they get if they lose, they're the ones that get left out because of what if Texas and Florida State and the like are undefeated. So all I'm saying is that they're not a lock, especially with how weak their non-conference was this year. Because remember, they played the UT Martins and the Ball States of the world. While some of the, now granted, it's not saying that some of these other teams had sparkling non-conference either. You have Texas playing Rice. You had
But Texas still played Alabama.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. So, all that said, Georgia's top 6 of the country in terms of scoring offense and defense. They had a 3-game stretch here late where they beat Missouri by 9, Ole Miss by 35, Tennessee in Knoxville by 28. They're the 2-time defending champions. So I still feel pretty strongly that they're going to be in. But all I'm saying is they're not a lock. So I'm saying hot, but not as hot as it could be.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. They are. I think it's hot for them to make it. Um, I think a lot of things have to fall into place for Georgia to miss out, even if they lose to Alabama. I mean, it is possible. When you look at the resumes, I would almost say Alabama's resume is better than Georgia's. But yeah, it's tough to leave out the defending 2-time national champions who have been undefeated all year, and then you've been on record saying that conference championship games really don't hold too much weight. So, if that's the case, if Georgia loses, how does that work? And how does that affect Alabama? But Georgia's, I mean, other than this past weekend with allowing Georgia Tech to get back into the game, Georgia's been on a tear recently. So they're clearly looking like the number 1 team in the country. They're in hot for me.
And Georgia Tech's, I mean, they're not a slouch either. I mean, Georgia Tech's had this weird.
This isn't the Georgia Tech of the last few years where it's like boring to watch and
they've had this weird run where they've like lost. I saw something on X and I can't remember what it was where like they've like lost all their even games, or no, they've won all their even games, even number of games, and obviously that's not true now because they, week 12, or their 12th game, or whatever. But at the time, because it was like right after they beat North Carolina, because they're like their odd number of games they've lost to the teams like Bowling Green, and then their even number of games they've like knocked off North Carolina, they've knocked off. So it's a real weird season for Georgia Tech. So they're kind of like a sneaky, weird, feisty team. So I'm kind of not surprised they came back in that game.
That's why they call them the Ramblin' Wreck.
Exactly. Number 2, Michigan. Hot or cold? This is Ghost Pepper for me. Hot. This is flaming hot.
Reaper.
Yes, flaming hot Cheetos, whatever you want to go with. They're the team I do have as a lock. Spoiler: I have them beating Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. Jim Harbaugh will be back. Offense has averaged 45 points per game in the 6 games he's coached this season. Even in the last 3-game stretch, they've put up 24, 31, and 30 points. I'll get into the numbers a little bit more in my Big Ten championship predictions, but the Wolverines are on the same plane, if not better, than Iowa's defense, and the offense is by far better. So Michigan beats Iowa, so that's why they're a lock for me. Michigan's in.
Yeah, I don't even need to dive in much deeper than that either. They're a lock, like I just said. Carolina Reaper, Ghost Pepper. I mean, whatever is gonna catch your mouth on fire. That's Michigan. Yeah, especially against Iowa. Iowa can't put points up. Come on.
No. Yeah. I think they're off like their team total. I was listening to the Ryan Russillo podcast and he was listing off like the different gambling numbers. I think their like offensive total is like 6.5. Like that's what they're like. And they're like, do you dare touch that point total for Iowa? It's gonna be rough.
I mean, yeah, I can see them getting a special teams touchdown or
yeah, maybe.
I mean,
or a defensive touchdown even.
Defensive. Right. I mean, Cooper John, he's good.
Hey, Cade McNamara revenge game. I don't know if he's playing or not. If he's
not, he's done for the year.
He's done for the year.
Okay. I mean, yeah, they're rolling out a backup quarterback. So
I gotcha. Number 3, Washington. Hot or cold, their likelihood of making the college football playoff. I've got room temperature, but it's room temperature in the winter when you're trying to save money on the electric bill. So it's a little colder. It's a little chilly. You're like, hey,
you said that thermostat at 63 when it's 24 degrees outside, and you're like,
yeah,
you're go put on another layer of clothing.
You're gonna go grab a sweater. You got a blanket on while you're watching TV. It's all good. Again, that designation may give away where I'm going with my Pac-12 title pick, but it's a game that will determine if they go to the college football playoff or not. It's pretty simple. If they win, they're in, but they haven't done much to inspire confidence for me the last few weeks. So that's why I've got them on the chillier side of that room temperature designation.
I'm actually going to go with, I'm going to say cold for Washington. And it, obviously it tips my hand to what my pick is for the Pac-12 championship. But like you said, Washington hasn't done much recently to inspire that faith. I mean, Washington State, they should have handled them easily, pretty easily. I mean, it's been a lot of just getting by for this Washington team this year, and I don't think you're going to be able just to get by a second time against Oregon.
It almost kind of reminds me of, because their offense looks almost completely different than what it was through the Oregon game, because they were lighting it up. Now, granted, I get it. It was Boise State, it was Tulsa, it was Michigan State, it was Cal. But at the same time, like, it's almost as if they're like, we know the Oregon game, and then potentially, but I mean, we didn't know how bad USC was going to get. Like, we know we have to get up for this Oregon game, and then it's Arizona, and then it's Arizona State, and also all these other games. So it's almost like they viewed that game against Oregon as kind of their Pac-12 championship game light. And once they got through that game, they're like, okay, well, we can kind of put it on cruise control until we get to, the next toughest game. And then they just haven't been able to kick it back into gear. So we'll see if they can this weekend in Las Vegas. But yeah, they've just seems like they've been escaping week after week after week. And, you would just like to see 1 week where they actually just had no problems and just blew out somebody, and it just hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So. Number 4, Florida State. Hot or cold? I've got the AC on for Florida State. They have to win the ACC championship if they want to get in, and even then, in my opinion, there's a chance they get left out, even as an undefeated conference champion. And the College Football Playoff Committee has never left out an undefeated Group of 5 champion. But with the options they have to choose from in their quarterback situation, there's a case to leave them out. I've heard comparisons made to the original college football playoff champion, the Ohio State Buckeyes, and what they were able to do with Cardale Jones, who was the third string quarterback for the Buckeyes. But Ohio State rolled Wisconsin in that Big Ten championship game, 59-0, and I don't see that happening in this game against Louisville. Plus, TCU was third that year, won their game on championship weekend to be co-champs with Baylor, but because the Big 12 didn't have a title game, they were left out. So it was more of... It was like, yes, Ohio State rolled Wisconsin, but it was more. I think if I'm remembering correctly, it was like TCU 3, Ohio State 4, Baylor 5. All 3 of those teams won, but because Ohio State didn't have or maybe Ohio State was 5th. I can't remember.
Ohio State was 5.
Okay, well.
They were just on the outside looking in,
right?
And they needed to
have
a huge performance to even be considered.
Right, that's right, because it was Ohio, it was Bama, Oregon, and Florida State ahead of okay, that's right. But anyway, yeah, it was more so the playoff committee trying to make an example. Like, yes, obviously Ohio State did amazing in that championship game, but also a part of it was the committee trying to make an example of the Big 12 and saying you have to have a championship game. You can't just have co-champions to double your chances of getting in. You have to, figure it out. So, I don't like it. I don't like conference championships potentially meaning nothing. I don't like undefeated Power 5 schools being left out. But just, this is not the same team without Jordan Travis. It's just not. And I don't see this, if you want to see what Georgia versus Florida State with no Jordan Travis is going to be, turn on the 2021 college football playoff with Alabama and Cincinnati, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be 2 good defenses, one offense that can move the ball and one offense that can't, and it's going to be, a kind of a snooze fest, because defenses will play really well, and you'll see a touchdown here and there from Georgia, but that you're not going to see much of anything else. So, I hate to say it, but I think there is an argument to be made to leave Florida State out, even if they win and go 13-0 undefeated ACC champs, especially because the ACC hasn't been the strongest conference either.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm giving Florida. I'm saying cold for Florida State as well, just because it's really tough, and the committee will look at not having your number one quarterback, and they'll look at, okay, what has your number two quarterback done? And yeah, you can compare it back to when Ohio State was rolling with Cardale Jones at as their third string quarterback. But they were also at that point, I mean, he was slinging it all over the field to an amazing group of wide receivers. And then on top of it, you had Ezekiel Elliott, who was just coming onto the scene and breaking out. And everybody was like, that dude is exciting. So they were looking at it, I think, from an excitement standpoint. And I mean, and Wisconsin was ranked too, by the way. They were no slouch of a team, and they got absolutely trucked. I don't think if it wasn't for that performance, I don't think Ohio State would have made the playoff that year.
Now, put it this way, too, though. Louisville is ranked, and if Tate Rodemaker goes out and performs really well and Florida State looks good, yeah, exactly.
But if it's it needs to be a very convincing win, I think. So I'm still going to say cold, just because this is one of those types of games that Jeff Brom can play spoiler. That's what he always got Purdue up for, these types of games, to play spoiler, especially when, I mean, not always, but it was pretty consistent. So I could see that type of thing happening here. I do think, though, that Florida State defense won't allow that to happen. And I'll get more into that later, but I just have a feeling Florida State's going to be left out. And they've been one of those teams that's kind of been a question mark anyways. They're kind of hovering right around being in and being out all year anyways. So
even with Jordan Travis and having a win over LSU and Clemson and all that stuff, they were still like third and fourth. So it's not like they were. Now, granted, it's because Ohio State went into Notre Dame and beat them. It's because, but they could have been ranked above Michigan all year too, if the committee was giving them any sort of leeway. They could have been over Michigan because Michigan didn't play anybody all year until they got to Penn State. So
yeah,
it is what it is. But yeah, I think it's definitely going to be, like I said, I don't love it, but it's something that could definitely happen. Number 5, Oregon. Hot or cold? I've got room temperature, but this is in the summer. Again, telegraphing my Pac-12 pick a little bit.
Is this Oregon summer, or are we looking at Alabama in the summer?
I'm gonna go. You know what? Yeah. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go just a nice Midwest summer day. We're gonna go.
Oh God, that could be anything.
Exactly. You don't know.
That could be Oregon summer.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna only say that because I'm trying not to telegraph my pick too hard here, but what I said for Washington rings true for Washington. Win and they're in, and they've been playing really well as of late. And their only loss, and they would, by winning, they would erase their only loss of the year. So I really like their odds to win and they get in anyway. But I really like their odds because based on the way that they're playing.
Yeah, I'm going hot for Oregon. I'm telegraphing my Pac-12 pick. I think the winner of the Pac-12 championship is in. That Oregon team, that's a good team. Bo Nix being led by Bo Nix. People like that team. And I can't, and same thing with Washington. If Washington ends up winning, I think they're in as well. It all comes down, but I'm leaning more towards Oregon right now just because of the way they're playing right now. And, a revenge factor from that game earlier in the year against Washington, which you can attest to. You were there. So yeah, I'm going hot for Oregon.
Number 6, Ohio State. Hot or cold on their playoff chances? I'm going cool, but not the coolest, or the coldest it could be. There is a path for the Buckeyes. There is. Georgia needs to beat Bama. Florida State needs to lose, and Texas needs to lose. Because we know no matter what, the Pac-12 champion's getting in, Michigan's going to get in. But, if Georgia wins, obviously they're in. Texas losing eliminates the Big 12. Florida State loses, that eliminates them. That leaves the door open Now, granted, I know you could also say, well, if that scenario happens, you would still potentially have a one-loss Washington. There's a discussion to be made there, but even then, like we've talked about, it's I would put Ohio State's resume up against Washington's, especially with what Washington's been looking like lately, and the fact that Ohio State played Notre Dame in Notre Dame and beat Notre Dame
And Penn State.
and Penn State, and also
and they looked competent against Michigan
and
this
only
year.
only lost to Michigan by 6.
Like Joel Klatt said, "Hey, look, this Ohio State team was much better prepared, much better ready to go play in the trenches against Michigan." I mean, if Ohio State had a quarterback, Ohio State probably wins that game.
Yeah,
but Kyle McCord is not a usable. I mean, he's usable, but he's not a quarterback that's going to win you that type of game.
No. They only fell to 6th in the AP. They fell to 6th, of course, in the college football playoff rankings as well. Their only loss is to number 3 Michigan, as I've said. They've got the win over Notre Dame. They've got the 6th best strength of schedule. They're number 1 according to the FPI power rankings. It's a long shot, but I think there is still a path for the Buckeyes to make the college football playoff.
Unfortunately, I have to go cold on this one. If the logic is going to be held true for Florida State without having Jordan Travis, then that logic has to be applied here as well to Ohio State. Ohio State's one loss, and they don't. I mean, outside of Marvin, I mean, yeah, their offense is, or at least their offense is good, but do you really believe, is Kyle McCord a college football playoff level quarterback? That's the issue. If Florida State's going to potentially get held out because Jordan Travis is injured and they're rolling with their backup with Tate Rodemaker, I have to look at Ohio State the same way, even though, but it's not their backup quarterback. Yeah, but that's not CJ Stroud out there. I can tell you that much. Kyle McCord has not instilled a whole lot of confidence. But what's funny is that Kyle McCord, you look at his numbers are up there, and actually in some places better than JJ McCarthy out of Michigan. So it's kind of one of those, he in the stats, it's like, okay, maybe he is, but then for me, it's the eye test. And I think that hinders Ohio State, especially when you look at some of these other schools that, I think what helps them, though, not be 100% cold is the fact that Texas is behind them, and is a one-loss Texas beating number 18 or number 19 Oklahoma State. Is that enough for them to jump over an Ohio State?
It is for them to have a conference championship, though.
Yeah, but look, they've left out conference champions before.
Right. I mean, by design, they always will.
Yeah.
For a 4-team playoff. But by design, it was designed to always leave out, even if there were 5 undefeated conference champions, one would just inherently be left out. That's how it was designed. But yeah, but you're right. They've left out conference champions, and it is hard to tell sometimes, what they value, because as far as, and I understand it's made vague for a reason, but it's, sometimes they reward you for playing on conference championship weekend, and sometimes you almost feel like, man, we were better off not playing this weekend because we could have just backed in like this other team did. So,
right.
So it's tough to tell. It really is.
Yeah. So I'm going cold, but it's kind of like when you you're stepping into a cool pool and you're like, okay, that's comfortable.
Number 7, Texas. Hot or cold? I'm going warm here. Like Oregon and Washington, the Longhorns can't lose this weekend, but they've got a much more favorable matchup, as you said, B. Scott. They've got number 19, Oklahoma State, who struggled to get past a 5-7 BYU team. Like Washington, their games as of late haven't done much to inspire me, but I get it. Ewers was hurt. But then the way they dismantled Texas Tech really put me back into being hyped about them again. So I'm back in the Texas bandwagon. I'm ready to see what they can do. So Texas is warm for me. I think they're in decent shape.
I bet Ohio State's really wishing they didn't run Quinn Ewers off right about now. Um, I'm actually going hot with Texas. I think they're putting together something that the first college football playoff national champion Ohio State pulled off, where they got hot and just started steamrolling teams. And I think they know that's what they need to do, and that's what they're doing. And I think that helps propel them into the playoff this year.
And then finally, number 8, Alabama. Hot or cold if they make the playoff. For me, I had room temperature twice already, but it was different designations. For them, just room temperature. They're right in the middle. It's another win and get in scenario for Alabama. And
It's that pizza on a Saturday morning that's been sitting out on the counter of your dorm room all night long.
But you're still gonna eat it. You're still
gonna eat it. Yes.
Definitely a different team than they were when they lost to Texas and struggled with USF earlier in the year. It's hard to believe they won't jump into the top 4 with a win over number 1 Georgia in the SEC championship game, and that's why I've got them at room temperature, because I can't foresee. Now, I guess I can foresee a scenario where if they win, but Texas also wins, I can see it where Bama only jumps to 5, Texas is 4, and Georgia's 3. That's a scenario you could see potentially. But I just don't see them leaving the SEC champion out, even with all the options that you've got. So I'm going Alabama. They're right in the middle for me.
I'm going cold with Alabama. And I think that speaks to where I'm going with my pick for the SEC championship more than anything. I think if you would have asked me this a week ago, I probably would have said warm, pretty close to hot. But then the way they struggled against Auburn.
I mean, say Iron Bowl, though.
I know, but.
Iron Bowl at Jordan Hare.
Yeah, but it just feels like in the past when Auburn hasn't been very good, Alabama rolls them. And they roll tide on the War Eagle there. So that kind of worried me a little bit, but I'm going cold for Alabama. Unfortunately, the Crimson Tide, I don't think are going to be in the playoff this year.
That'd be the first time they haven't made it in 2 straight years, which is pretty wild. They'll be in next year because we'll go to 12 teams. But now let's move on to our championship weekend predictions. We're going to give you who we think is going to win all 5 Power 5 conference championships. We'll start in chronological order, Cron Pod style here, starting with the Pac-12.
May they rest in peace.
Yes. Final Pac-12 championship game. And I'm going with Oregon. The Ducks have the second best offense in the country, averaging 45 points per game, and that's par for the course for them. But what's atypical for them is that they rank 7th in the nation in scoring defense. And since that epic matchup on October 14th between Washington and Oregon, Washington beat Arizona State by 8, Stanford by 9, USC by 10, Utah by 7, Oregon State by 2, and Washington State by 3. Oregon, on the other hand, beat Washington State by 14, Utah by 29, Cal by 44, USC by 9, Arizona State by 36, and Oregon State by 24. So the Ducks have just looked better, and I think they exact their revenge. So the Oregon Ducks get their win.
Give me the Oregon Ducks. This is a revenge tour. Oregon gets themselves into the college football playoff behind the arm of Bo Nix and that surprising defense that they've got rolling up there in Eugene.
Big 12 championship game. I'm going with the Texas Longhorns. The Longhorns are 3rd in the Big 12 in scoring offense, averaging 35 points per game, and are the best in terms of scoring defense. allowing just 17 points per game. OK State is the middle of the road in the conference in both categories. And like I mentioned before, what these two did this past weekend strongly impacted my thoughts here. Texas annihilated Texas Tech, and Oklahoma State struggled with BYU. They won in 2 overtimes. Both Tech and BYU are around 500. So against a 500 team, Texas won by 50, and Oklahoma State went to double overtime. So give me the Longhorns to win the Big 12.
Hook them. They're going to win the Big 12. Look, they know what they got to do to get into the college football playoff, and that is put the hammer down and don't look back. And that's exactly what they'll end up doing against Oklahoma State.
SEC.
Oh, and it's played in Texas. Come on.
True. Very true. SEC championship. I'm going Georgia. It's super close. The Bulldogs are score 40 points per game, the 8th best team in the nation in that category. They hold teams to 16 points per game, which is 6th best in the country in that category. Alabama is top 20 in scoring offense and defense, averaging 36 points per game and allowing 18 points per game. So it's more of a coin flip than what you think. Like I said, Alabama is not the same team that struggled early on in the season. But I'm gonna go with the back-to-back. I'm going with the back-to-back defending champions. Georgia gets the job done. They win the SEC championship again and get a chance to go for the three-peat for the college football playoffs. So Georgia gets the win in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, I'm going with Georgia as well. I think in the past, Georgia may have just gone, okay, whatever happens in this game happens, we're in. But because, there's so many teams that could get in, I don't think Georgia wants to risk it. And there's always, Kirby Smart doesn't want to lose to Nick Saban. Come on. So yeah, I'm taking Georgia because honestly, Georgia started the year off and they kind of struggled a little bit, and it looked like, oh, this isn't the same Georgia. They look vulnerable. But they have since turned that around and look like a national championship team yet again.
The ACC. It's Florida State and Louisville. These are the top 2 defenses in the ACC.
Which is the most surprising with a Jeff Brom team.
Right. Florida State is first in the conference, allowing 17 points per game. Louisville is fourth, allowing 20 points per game. Offensively, these two teams rank first and third. The Noles are first, scoring 39 points per game. The Cardinals are third, averaging 33 points per game. But again, like we mentioned, the Seminoles are on their second-string quarterback. And against a Florida Gators team that ranks outside the top 10 in the SEC in scoring defense, Tate Rodemaker and this Florida State team struggled to put up 24 points, which is 2 touchdowns below their average. So, again, close. I don't really know a ton what to make of it, especially, I would have, first and foremost, I would have loved to sit here and argue Louisville's case to be in the college football playoff. I would have loved it, especially if Ohio State and Louisville had both won, because they both played Notre Dame, and I get that Louisville played Notre Dame at home and Ohio State played Notre Dame in South Bend, but Louisville beat Notre Dame by a lot more than Ohio State did. I would have loved to sit here and just play devil's advocate and told you that Louisville deserves to be in with a win. So I'm very bummed that I didn't get a chance to do that with them losing to Kentucky, which also makes me then very skeptical about what they can do even with Tate Rodemaker being the quarterback for FSU. So I don't really know what to make of this game, but I do think the college football playoff always seems to kind of work itself out. And so I think it kind of gets a little bit more of a one less wrinkle. Louisville gets it done. The Cardinals win the ACC.
Yeah. I wonder, has it ever happened that a head coach has coached in back-to-back P5 conference championship games with 2 different teams?
That I have no idea.
That'd be an interesting. Come on, JMV intern, figure that out.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because this Jeff Brom coached Purdue in the Big Ten championship game last year, and now Louisville in the ACC championship game this year.
I would guess it's probably not happened, because either you're.
Because if you're a P5 coach and you're making it to your conference championship,
you're
most
fired.
likely not. you're not
Oh,
getting fired, and you're most likely not moving on to another job because most jobs you're going to look at are going to be upward movements
yeah,
to like the Ohio States, the Michigans, Alabamas, so on and so on. You're not going to make a lateral move,
right.
and that's what Jeff Brom essentially did, was a lateral move. So yeah, I'd be interested to know. But this is I think this is the toughest one to pick because you don't know what you're going to get from the Florida State offense. I'm going to go with Florida State here in a very close one, just because I have seen firsthand what a strong, tough defense can do to Louisville quarterback Jack Plummer, and it can rattle him. I mean, this is the kid that got benched in favor of Aiden O'Connell at Purdue. We all know how that turned out, but I don't know. Maybe things have changed. I'll be honest. I haven't watched much Louisville this year, and I'm very glad they lost to Kentucky, so we weren't having to talk about them being in the college football playoff conversation, because that would have just stung as a Purdue fan.
True.
But
I thought you were just saying no because you thought it was ridiculous. I was 100% gonna sit here and lobby for Louisville.
No. But everybody, I think I'll tell you, every Purdue fan was like, "Look, yeah, Jeff Brom's probably gonna have a shot at making a college football playoff in Louisville because it's 100 times easier to win in the ACC than it is the Big Ten." So, but I'm going with Florida State here in a close one, just because I feel like their defense has prevailed more times than not this year, and a strong defense, a tough defense can rattle Jack Plummer, and I can see that happening in this game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. If it's a blowout, Florida State's in the college football playoff, hands down. They're in. But I think it's going to be close, and that's what scares committee members.
That just, talking about, you saying that being in the ACC, is easier than being in the Big Ten, made me think of, okay, but it was also the Big Ten West. But I was like, is there a segment idea in there where we're like, picking if you would rather coach in this specific conference of a stronger division, or in this specific division of a harder conference, or a lesser conference on the whole? That'd be an interesting thing to
Well, obviously,
discuss.
Jeff Brom
He
chose
proves that,
the lesser conference of a whole. Well,
Yeah.
he also knew. I mean, look, it's kind of a mute point because the Big Ten is going away from divisions after this year.
Right. Yeah. So that segment doesn't even matter because I think all conferences, are going away, except for I haven't heard what the ACC or the SEC is doing.
Yeah, I don't know.
But because I had always, because like that's the thing, like I know we had talked about before, like, oh well, it's not really gonna matter a whole lot when the Oregons and the USC's join the Big Ten, because they'll just join the Big Ten West. Purdue and such will move over to the East, and you'll just have Oregon and Minnesota and Nebraska and all them in the West. And then so that's why I figured would happen in the SEC. I was like, oh, they'll just chuck Texas in the East, Oklahoma in the West, problem solved. But I wonder if they'll go away with it completely. I mean, maybe it's already been announced, but anyway. Final. Speaking of the Big Ten, so you go. Sorry, you go with Florida State.
Yeah, I'm going with Florida State.
Okay, you went with Florida State. Okay, that's what I thought. All right. I got distracted by thinking about, like, wait, is the Big Ten West easier to be in than the entire ACC? So I got distracted there at the end there. So speaking of the Big Ten conference championship pick, already told you who I'm going with. I'm going with the Michigan Wolverines. They play Iowa, and these two teams are in the top 4 in the country when it comes to scoring defense. Michigan is number 1, allowing 10 points per game. Iowa is number 4, allowing 12 points per game. So the difference is going to be who can get it going offensively, and in that regard, I give Michigan the upper hand. Not too much of a surprise there. The Wolverines are 13th in the country in scoring offense, averaging 38 points per game. The Iowa Hawkeyes are 121st in the nation offensively, averaging 18 points per game. And guess who they rank below? They rank below Ball State in terms of scoring offense this season. So Ball State, I think by .2, averages a better margin per game than the Iowa Hawkeyes. So
That's rough.
So even if it's a defensive struggle, Michigan has the offense to get it done. Give me the Wolverines. They win the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, this is Michigan. I mean, I thought Purdue had a better chance last year of going up against Michigan because Purdue at least had the firepower to go against them. Iowa can't. If Michigan gets a 2-score lead, Iowa's toast. They're done. So I don't think this one's very competitive. I don't think even Michigan needs to steal signs to figure out what Iowa's offense is going to do. Right. So give me Michigan. They're locked in.
This is going to kind of remind me of, I'm not going to say this because this will ultimately jinx it. No, Iowa will win. But, the thing I just thought of was back at Ball State when Ball State played Iowa, we gave out player of the game for that Iowa Ball State game on Cardinal College game day, and my player of the game was the bus because that's what got Iowa to the stadium. That's all that they really needed. That's going to kind of be the case for Michigan. The player of the game is going to be the bus because as long as they show up, they'll be in pretty good shape.
Hey, you know what? There was a Big Ten championship where a while back, before the college football playoff started, where a overlooked Michigan State team came in and beat an Ohio State team that all Ohio State had to do was beat Michigan State, and Ohio State was going to be playing for the BCS National Championship. And they lost. It was like, wasn't Javon Ringer?
Right, but that's what I was just about to say.
On
Right,
I
was like, it was like probably Javon Ringer. It was probably
I'm pretty
Kirk
sure
Cousins.
I was still at Ball State.
Yeah,
the quarterback for Ohio State was Braxton Miller.
Well, hey, you know what? If you guys are listening on the podcast app or you guys are watching on YouTube, go over to it's probably you gotta dig a little deep on the channel here, but go to the memory lane portion of the podcast page here. And Ben Bousman and I reacted to some old Big Ten championship games, and that one I think is on there. So go back and relive that because some of those Big Ten championship games early on were wild. There was that Wisconsin one where you literally had 3 future NFL running backs on the backfield, like Monty Ball and Melvin Gordon. And
James White.
Yeah, James White. You had like literally Kirk Cousins versus Russell Wilson one year. Like you're like, what the heck? These were the Big Ten championship games back in the day. Like now we're getting, now it's it's still obviously teams that are vying for the college football playoff, but it's like, man, these were the games back in the day. You had Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins. You had some big names. So pretty wild. So we'll conclude the podcast today with who we think is going to make the college football playoff. So we've kind of we've given you everything. We've given you what we think about each of the teams that are still fighting and our conference championship picks. So kind of gives you where we think everything is going to fall into place. So we'll kind of confirm that here. I think the college football playoff, the way it's going to align, Georgia, SEC champions, they'll be number 1. Michigan, Big Ten champions, they'll be 2. Pac-12 champion, Oregon, they'll be 3. Texas, Big 12 champion, they'll be 4. Of course, Florida State, Ohio State left out. Alabama lost, they'll be left out. Washington lost, they'll be left out. So you'll see Georgia, Michigan, Oregon, Texas, which I'm pretty happy about. That's from my preseason predictions were Georgia, Bama, Texas, and Michigan. So I'm flipping out Alabama for Michigan, Alabama for Oregon, and I'm not upset about that. So, that's the way it's going to be. They'll put Michigan and Oregon in the Rose Bowl, for the final Pac-12 Big Ten Rose Bowl ever. It'll be amazing. So it has to be that way, right? So, I'm going with that. Which look, I'll tell you right now, this is what I'm hoping for. I know we'll get into our prediction for the college football playoff next week. We got some more discussions next week that are our bowl special. But what I'm hoping for is I really want you guys know I root for the stories. So Bo Nix, first game as a quarterback for Oregon, absolutely gets his rocked by Georgia. In Atlanta, opening weekend 2 years ago. Last season. So they play Michigan first game. That's a tough defense. They can potentially shut down Michigan. They advance to the SEC to the national championship, probably against Georgia. So Bo Nix gets a chance to exact his revenge. Remember, Bo Nix started as an SEC quarterback at Auburn. His first ever game was beating Oregon in one of the opening weekend neutral site games. So Bo Nix goes from a SEC school to the Pac-12 and then leads Pac-12 Oregon over the big bad SEC in his final game as a college quarterback. So that's what I'm hoping happens. I want Oregon to exact their revenge in that game.
If that happens and Oregon wins the national championship, which conference claims that national championship? The Pac-12 or the Big Ten?
Yeah. Well, here's what I would hope. Obviously. Well, here's the thing. So it will probably be the Pac-12. Well, they'll both probably. The answer is probably both because you'll see the Pac-12 claim.
The Big Ten takes claim to Nebraska's
right. That's what I was gonna say. When you see like college football stuff on the Big Ten network, you'll see replays of because I'm sure you'll see it anyway. You'll see replays of like all the Oregon games and all the Washington games and all the USC.
Well, the next thing is a lot of like the past like big games, like national televised big brand games for some of these Pac-12 teams have actually come against other Big Ten teams. So that does help. Like Washington beating Purdue in the Rose Bowl or Ohio State beating Oregon in the national championship. So those types of things, that helps.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. So for me, I'm right there with you. Georgia, Michigan, Oregon, Texas.
So you are leaving out undefeated Florida State then?
I am just because of the whole quarterback thing. Now, it all could change if Florida State just absolutely smokes Louisville. Then it's like, okay, any thought we had that held them back is gone. Okay, they're in. But right now I have to go with Texas just the way at the 4 because of the way they're playing. They're on a mission. They know what they need to do to get in. Kind of like that Ohio State team. That all they had to do, they just needed to keep winning and keep winning big. And that's what they did.
Exactly. Yeah. That was a fantastic run that they had to the national championship that year.
Really, I mean, that semifinal game against Alabama was probably one of the best college football games of all time. It's got to be up there in the top 10, top 5.
So I have a fraternity brother who left me, who's a big Ohio State fan, and I always gave him grief because it was different when I was 22. I hated Ohio State when I was in college. I don't really care that much anymore. But I used to really, really not like Ohio State. And so we used to give each other grief about it. And so when Ohio State beat Alabama, because in those games I was like, okay, fine, I want Ohio State to beat Bama because I hate Bama more than I hate Ohio State. So fine, Ohio State could beat Bama. In that game, I still have his like drunken voicemail that he left me where he was like, oh my God, like I just lost 15 years off my life. That was an insane game, whatever. I still have that voicemail on my phone because it was just such a funny, fantastic thing because that game was so wild.
It was.
So, yeah. But there you have it. We've gotten you all set for I can't talk. We got you all set up for college football championship weekend.
Conference championship weekend.
Yeah. Conference championship weekend. We're gonna get everything settled. The dust is gonna get settled. We're gonna get our college football playoff set, and we're gonna figure out who's gonna be playing in the final 14 playoff before it expands to 12 next year. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Remember, you can like us on Facebook. 3C Media. Go follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. Go follow us go subscribe to us over on YouTube. If you're on the podcast app listening right now, head on over to YouTube, hit subscribe, ring the bell. Go watch those old memory lanes. We have like Peyton's return to Lucas Oil on there. We've got those old Big Ten championships. Go check those out. Also go over to TikTok as well. Like us and follow us over there. And if you're watching us on YouTube, head on over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can find the Crash Course Podcast. You can find me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
Next week, like I said, we're going to have our bowl special. We're going to be talking about the college football playoff. We're going to be talking about Notre Dame's bowl game. We're going to be getting you prepared for the end of the season. It's our last podcast before, of course, our best of 2023 for the year. So really excited for that. So we'll see you guys next weekend. But until then, have a good week, everybody.